Well, hello and welcome to another episode of Answers from the Stairs. I'm the host, Chris Fester, and I am thrilled to have with me a guy that's really been in my life for a short amount of time, but I feel like I've known you forever, Brian. Like we had four total conversations, maybe.
Yeah, something
Um,
like that. Man, it seems like a lot more though, doesn't it?
really does. But every conversation has been such a blessing. And getting to know you over the past year and a half or so, and getting to know some of the backstory to the Brian Hess story. It's just super inspirational. So, like, that's the reason I invited you here is to be able to like let your story be told and let everybody understand that these stairs that we climb as we develop ourselves and the struggles that come along with that, and how there's really never an answer at the top of that staircase, because is there really a top of the staircase? Um, so thank you for your time today. And I
Grateful
said,
to be here, man. Grateful to be here. I mean that. It's good to spend time with you, but it's cool to dig into these stories, man. It's because you forget, like sometimes you forget all the things that, led to you being where you are, and it's good to take those walks down memory lane. So I'm grateful for the opportunity.
and I think that's a source of like you said, grateful. I think it's a source of gratitude. Like when I go back and reflect on every point of my life where I know, number one, for me, I can see where God's had his hand in it. And it just makes me super grateful. And it allows me to extend faith out the windshield when I look in the rearview mirror. So, but thank you so much. I said we're going to go back to like June 12th, 1979. You probably don't remember that day. But looking at like as much as I could find out about you, the first job you got listed, and I don't know if it was your first job. I would like to know what your first job was, but the first job you got listed is with Verizon, and you were 25 years old. I'm guessing just in sales. Was there
Yeah.
anything before that?
Well, yeah, interesting, man. So, number one, I started delivering newspapers when I was 11 years old, but I do actually remember something from June 12th, 1979. And that was that my parents' house that they still live in to this day, the shell of that home was put up on June 12th, 1979. And
Wow.
so, yeah, up until then, they were living in a mobile home in the front part of the property that my parents live on today. And literally the shell of my house that I grew up in was put up on my birthday in 1979. Yeah.
What a cool story.
Yeah. Cool little anchor there. Right. But yeah, man, grew up, son of a steel worker, and my mom stayed at home. So kind of a traditional family. And so, my brother was 5 years older than me, and he delivered newspapers, and he was older than me. And so I kept saying to my dad, like, hey, my brother's, making money. Like, I want to make money. Like, how do I? And he's like, I think you're too young. And so I just, I guess this is a trait I've carried with me for a long time. Persistence, won. And my dad at 11 years old agreed for me to have a paper route, which meant that he had to get up at 4:30 in the morning and take me on this paper route before he went to work in the steel mill. That was a 45-minute drive, from my house. And so that was the beginning of my career. When I turned 16 and I could get like a, real job, I guess, a legal job.
Right.
I worked as a dishwasher and a busboy at a restaurant. That was like the first like, real job that I had. And then through college, I worked in a retail store. So I worked at Abercrombie and Fitch as a assistant manager and manager, and really learned a lot about leadership. Then you're leading other people that are your age, which is ironically very difficult. At that age, it's like nobody takes anything serious. And so I was doing that while I was in college. Ended up dropping out of college because I had opportunity to make money, and I was going for business. And I was like, man, I'm sitting in classes listening to professors talk about business, and I'm living something that's probably a little different than what I'm hearing in this classroom, right? Outside of it. And so I remember, calling my parents, telling them I was not going to finish school. And that was an unpopular conversation.
I bet.
Uh, but I said, like, I could always go back. And lucky for me, one thing led to another. And, my career kind of got started that way of, working in retail and then finding another retail um, opportunity. So I just, kept finding new things to do that were a little bit different. And so that second opportunity was I worked at Best Buy, like right out of college. And that taught me a lot, man. That was like my first real, sales job, if you will.
Mhm.
So I got hired to run the wireless phone department at Best Buy, and that was, the smallest department in the store. And next thing you know, I was running the biggest department in the store. And then they relocated me to Ohio, and then I grand opened a couple stores for them. And in the process of learning all of that, I was like, man, I don't know if I want to do this forever. So, keeping my options open. And I got hired at Verizon to run one of their stores, which, looking back at it, dude, I was like 23 or 24 years old. I'm like thinking to myself, man, I wish I could go back to that interview and figure out what the heck those people, were thinking. And so I got into retail there, and over the next few years, I was sent to, pretty much every store that needed, help in some way, shape, or form. I became kind of a fixer, if you will, both at Best Buy and Verizon. And so when I went to Verizon, the last store that I was at is the largest store in like 10 states or something, or the busiest store in 10 states. Very successful for a couple of years there. We were, the best store in our area or region for a number of months, like 23 out of 24 months.
Holy smokes.
And so at that point, I was like, man, I think I want to like figure out how to do something other than retail, like, not being working on every holiday. And so there were opportunities in the business channel of Verizon, and I was like, I'm going to go for this. And, everybody was kind of like, that's not how this works. Like, and I was like, well, shit, man, they gave me the keys to a retail store at 23. This seems like way less of a risk. Right. And, so long story short, I interviewed for that job and I got it. And I, didn't know anything about outside sales. Most of those jobs, by the way, I was leading people that were twice my age, which again, I never thought of I never thought of much at the time. But, as time went on, it was like, man, that was crazy. Like I was 25 years old leading people that were 55, but I always had like that knack to be able to communicate with people regardless of, where they were in their careers or whatever, always had respect for people and always, tried to be a great leader. And so as I went into that, business channel, I did that here in Pittsburgh for a few years, had some success. And so I was on this track of, being able to be promoted. But in Pittsburgh, the market doesn't grow much. So the only way you get a promotion is if somebody retires, right? So
Right.
I put my name in the hat. I was, single. I didn't have a lot of responsibility. So I'm like, hey, I'll go wherever in the country as long as it's, something that I would find attractive. And so I got the opportunity to interview in California and Florida, and ended up going to Florida with Verizon, relocated there. And my very first appointment in Florida was with a guy that owned a asphalt paving company that was from Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. And
Wow.
at the end of that meeting, he said, young man, you should quit your job and come work for me. And I'm thinking like, you got to be crazy, man. I'm in a bad neighborhood here. I'm 30 years old working at Verizon. I just got this promotion that I've been like, I was doing better than anybody I knew from Uniontown, Pennsylvania, right?
Sure.
And yeah, so that's what led me into the construction space. So
Yeah,
that's a quick 5-minute description of 30 years of my life.
that's okay. That I was going to head to that question. It's like, what in the world made you jump from Verizon and sales into Driveway Maintenance Incorporated? Because that was like you were there for 3 years. I mean, like you said, he just met with you and said, "You need to come work for me."
Yeah, literally, man. He was a great recruiter, and really, taught me so much about business. That situation didn't end the way that I would want it to in an ideal scenario, but I'm so grateful for the experience because that guy gave me an opportunity to come into an industry that changed my life, changed my family. Has really felt like home from the minute that I walked into it. The blue collar industry is like, that was my dad and everybody that I knew, and so yeah, that day I was just called to that meeting last minute, like, hey, will you come? This customer's upset. We owe them like $8,000 in back bill credits, and
Oof.
he's pretty fired up. But yeah, at the end of that meeting, like, oh, the guy that I was going with, he was like, we got a great relationship. I just need you to come along as like kind of a face. Yeah, that didn't go the way that he had planned it at all. Like that guy was destroying him in this meeting. And so I stepped in and was like, hey man, I don't know everything about your account because I'm still living in a hotel. I just got here. And he's like, where did you move here from? And I said, Pittsburgh. And he was from Pittsburgh. So he was like, you ever had a hot dog from the O, like the local well-known hot dog place? And he had just been in Pittsburgh 2 weeks prior. And so we hit it off. And, obviously I didn't take his job offer, but he invited me to his house that Friday night. And when I drove to his house, it looked a lot different than the bad neighborhood where the office was.
I
And so
bet.
I thought like, oh, maybe there is something to this, asphalt thing that I should take a look at. And over the next year, I got to know him really well, know his business, tried to help his business, just, being a nice guy. And yeah, one day at dinner with me and Lori, was my girlfriend, now my wife, and him and his wife, he said, you tell me how much you want to make and I'll pay it. Just come work for me. And I was like, well, man, I've been waiting to hear that my whole life, right? Like, that's a pretty good deal.
Name your price.
Yeah, yeah. And so yeah, so I did. And man, I think back then too, man, like what made me do that? That seems pretty crazy. When you tell the story, like you got a great job, corporate America, I'm taking people to sporting events, I'm going, you know, pretty good gig. But it just, didn't feel right for me. Like the cultural alignment of that position and where I was in my life, I just felt like, man, I'm not going to move around the country. And, I wanted to have a family. So I'm like, if I keep moving, like my kids are never going to have roots and stability. And that was really what I saw was like people that wanted to climb that ladder, they had to just relocate. And I didn't want that to be me. And so, I saw that as an opportunity like, hey, man, I've been a top performer everywhere that I've gone. If I could get a little closer to the checkbook in a business, I'm probably a lot more valuable in this small business than I am, in a corporate setting. And so that was my thinking, and it led me to here.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a big jump. And that happened, best I could tell, you were there until 2014, which is the same year that you got married. And then
Yep.
and then the job was national pavement. So again, inside the pavement space. So staying in the space. So did somebody just recruit you away from there because they saw the success you'd had at driveway maintenance or
Yeah, there was a lot of people, I was definitely an outside the box thinker when I came into construction because I didn't know anything about construction. So I was like, why the heck are we doing all this stuff this way? This doesn't make any sense, right? Like there was not a lot of innovation, um there wasn't a lot of sales, like, sales techniques that were being used at all, right? It was just like estimating and throwing paper on the street and hoping for the best. And so we transformed that and grew that company pretty significantly over 3 years. And so, a lot of people recognize that in the industry. And so when I decided, to move on from that place, the options were definitely plentiful. And so, and I really liked the idea. So National Payment was a brand new company. So a startup, to be able to take something from nothing. And so, that taught me a lot about, what it means to be a startup and how to do that. And so when you look back at the journey, many people ask today, like, how did you accomplish so much at the payment group in such a short period of time? It's all the lessons from the other places that you've been. It's not just almost 7 years here. It's all of the lessons and all of the things that you learned what to do and not to do from all the other stops on the journey.
yeah, especially like you said it. Part of the reason I'm assuming the guy offered you, hey, you tell me what you want to make and I'm going to make that happen. But you said working at Verizon, you were willing to help him with his business. Like you were
Yep.
already trying to show benefit. Right.
Yep.
And then being pulled into a situation as a startup, like like you're getting right in that situation, you were able to practice with somebody else's money. Like it was
Yes.
their business, but you were there at that base level of the management and the formation of the company and learn all
Yeah.
that.
Yeah. It's why I say to people, I think a lot of people in today's world, like entrepreneurship has become this like trendy thing that people love to, glorify. It's like that's not for everybody, man. Like, get inside of a business, spend a lot of time learning. I mean, when you look at my career, I didn't start this business till I was 38.
Right.
And so all of that time leading up to it, it was training, right? And to your point, like you are learning with somebody else's money. And so like that's not a bad thing, especially if you can contribute tremendous value. You could do
Right.
pretty well for yourself and be educating yourself to a higher level at the same time. And you know, all of those experiences were instrumental in being able to get out of the gate here quickly.
Um, and you said it, you started it when you were 38. So 2018 is when you started the pavement group.
Mhm.
And looking at it, like, and I'm not going to fast forward, but so far, but 2018 to 2025, the last stats I could find, you were in 44 states with 1,500 plus partners, and you developed
3,100 plus partners.
3,100 partners. Man, that's freaking amazing. And then 26 in-house employees. Is that about right? Or is it
There's about 50 now.
50
Yeah.
now? So, like, that's a lot of growth in a relatively short amount of time. And what most people would say, and at 38, most people are like set in a career. Like you
Yeah.
stepped out to say, no, I'm going to create something of my own. What was the driving force behind that stare?
Well, this will be a great lesson for people that are listening because, you know, for me, I was working for people. Those businesses, you know, continued to grow every time. And somehow everything just would like, it would go a little sideways, whether something was sold or something didn't pan out the way that I wanted it to. Like something was always off. And, you know, every one of those stops, man, you know, I'm grateful for the people. I still speak to all the people that are part of that journey. Um, but it was like the company that I went to work for and work with last, it was being sold. And so it was being sold to a private equity backed company. And I was like, man, am I going to go build something else for someone else again? And dude, I was 38. I had 3 kids. My wife stayed at home. And I was like, man, this is scary, right? Like to take this jump. You know, we had $100,000 investment that started all of this. And so I was like, man, 100 grand is not a lot of money. Like, you know, to start a business like this and get it going, it's just not a lot of money. It's razor thin to be able to make it. And as I was thinking through like doing it, you know, that all didn't even happen yet. I was just like, should I do this? And my wife was like, you need to do this. She's like, I don't care if we live under a bridge as long as we have each other and our kids. Um, you know, you need to do this. And that that was really, it was like, man, if she believes in me
Mm-hmm.
more than I believe in myself, like what am I doing? Right? Like what, you know, what a selfish person I'm being to think like I don't want to do this, right? Like, you know, or maybe I not that I don't want to, but maybe I can't, or all the doubts that you have when you're thinking about, you know, taking that jump. And so, yeah, Lori is ultimately responsible for a lot of, you know, pushing me over the edge to do it. And I would tell anybody, man, when you take that jump, like you're going to figure out what you're actually capable of. You know, when people ask me, like, what motivated you the first year, like I worked out of my house. If you come to my house, like my office right inside the front door, and it's got glass doors. And so I had 3 little faces staring in those windows every day, you know, looking at me, making calls, you know, trying to acquire new business that could, you know, get us to the next job and the next payroll and the next.
Right.
And so it, you know, built-in motivation will teach you what you're actually capable of. And, you know, interesting enough, so when they offered me a job to stay with the company that I was with, right? They said, you know, here's your offer, and we made in profit in the first 60 days what they offered me in a salary for an
Oh,
entire year at that company. And so, you know, when you set your mind to something, and I would say also that, you know, a lot of people doubt you, you know, like, or think you're crazy or think it's not going to work. You know, I remember having a conversation with my dad. My dad's a steel worker, right? Get a job, make sure it
right.
has a 401k and insurance, and buy a house and
Yeah.
have kids and retire.
Get the Timex.
Yep. And so my dad says in the entryway right outside the office I just described, he says, what are you going to do if this doesn't work? You got 3 kids, a wife that stays at home. What are you going to do if it doesn't work? I said, jokingly, I said, well, I'd imagine dad will have that conversation in a different house because the bank will probably take this one. but I'm
That's
not
all.
thinking that far ahead. I don't think it's not going to work. Right.
Right.
So, but yeah, Lori is ultimately a huge factor in making that decision. I knew it would work, like I had done it before, so I knew it would work. But it's scary, man. Almost too much to bear.
So
And so
go
I
ahead.
joke around and say, like, man, if I just said this on my show the other day, if I knew what it took, I don't know that I would have done it, right? Like, I'm glad I didn't have any idea how hard it would be because, wow, dude, it's a lot. Those you talk about stairs. These are like cliffs that we climb up, with no shoes on
Right.
sometimes.
Yeah. And I think, you mentioned your wife, and I like giving her so much honor in that. I like the conversations I have with guys that are even in this space, like in the car space, that want to be quote like that. They want to be a dealer. And then they have someone at home that's calling them at 5:15 going, "Hey, what time will you be home today?" And then I've got guys in the space that their wife, when they get home, they ask them, "Hey, did you get everything done today?" There's two, like one's like, "Hey, like go, I believe in you, go." And the other one's like to me, it seems like almost like an unbelief. If they're unwilling to push you toward the dream that you think you have, then they're just letting you know, like, I don't know that that's possible, you know?
Never work. Yeah,
Yeah.
if you have to focus on home while you're at work or work while you're at home, you're already in trouble.
Yeah.
There's already water in the boat.
That's a good word. Cause I think it's both ways, right?
Yes. Yeah.
It's
Like, dude, if I got to worry about my kids being fed or taken care of while I'm here, I'm not going to be very good at what I do.
right,
And I'm not going to be present for these people. Right.
right.
So it takes having a wife that undeniably is going to take care of that. And my wife is an incredible, incredible mother, and she holds it down. I don't have to think about that.
So in the since creating the pavement group, like you've jumped in some other things, right? One of those things it looks like to come first, and maybe I'm wrong in the order. If I am, let me know. But Top Contractor School, like you founded that. Tell me a little bit about like how does that how did you go from okay, I'm going to create this pavement group and this business for myself, and hey, now I'm going to create this space where other people can learn to do and learn from my mistakes and learn from the toe stumping, I guess is what I'll call it. Like, where'd that drive come from?
So, Top Contractor School is a vision that I had, at the same time that I was creating the vision for the pavement group. Top Contractor School kind of came along with that. So those both started like right at the same time because, in having 3,100, partners across the country, one of the things that I recognized about contractors was that, there's so many people that are incredibly talented at the trades, but there's not a lot of, formal training on like, how do you handle finances, or how do you handle taxes, and how do you hire and recruit employees? How do you create a sales strategy that, lasts the test of time? How do you market better in your own city, wherever you are, or in a region? And so, I knew that if I could make better local contractors, that would be better for us. So, like, we don't own any equipment at the payment group. So, like, if I don't have a contractor that is great, that's willing to negotiate on with us on how to deliver this at a high level for our clients, I'm sunk. It's like, I don't have any oxygen. And so my goal was, how do I give back to these people who are going to help us build our brand and build our business? And everybody thought I was crazy, man. They're like, why are you going to teach these people? What are they going to need you for? If you teach them all the things that I just listed off, well, then they're just going to take all your business. It's like, well, no, culture fixes that, right? Like, the ability to give them something they have a harder time getting. And so I knew something that those people didn't, which was, these larger brands that we do business with, they don't, not every local contractor has the ability to reach them because they want somebody to take care of a section of the country. And so by being able to, kind of buy bigger chunks of the pie, if you will, from these local contractors, we can elevate their businesses, they can elevate ours, and everybody wins. And so it comes down to, were we willing to teach them? And then were we willing to be transparent about how our business functions in order to kind of pair the pavement group with Top Contractor School. And 1,600 and change contractors later through Top Contractor School, I would say that we were on the right track. That we had something to offer people. Number one, contractor business owners have this feeling of like, man, they feel all alone. And so what ended up happening as a result of Top Contractor School is this incredible community of people that, you know, they do everything together. Like we go on vacations together, and we pray together, and we do life together. It's not like we're just part of this, mentorship group. Like
Right.
it's far greater than that. And so, that vision was, how do I elevate other people? And in turn, the rising tide lifts all the ships kind of strategy. And everybody, again, my dad will tell you, he thought I was crazy. He's like, I don't know what the heck you think you're doing. Like, you really going to get people to like come to these things? And I was like, I don't know either, Dad, but we'll find out, right? As you keep going, the market will validate or
That's right.
invalidate everything that you try. And yeah, it's been an incredible journey, man. It's probably the most fulfilling work that I do, right? Of being able to watch these companies go from, small startups in some cases, or long time family businesses that kind of hit a lid, and being able to break through that lid with people, and then watch those businesses flourish and have a whole different set of problems, and all that kind of stuff. But yeah, the Top Contractor School came first, and then through Top Contractor School, where you're going to go next, I'll just go there for you. We started, a lot of companies said, we want to do marketing and media
Mhm.
kind of like you do. And that's a challenge, because it's hard to set that stuff up. It's hard to find all those resources, especially in a local market. Some markets are much smaller and different than others. And so what we came to the conclusion was that we could provide it for them. So we started a media arm of Top Contractor School, and delivered that content for them. And so that led to non-construction companies saying the same thing, like, hey, I'd like to do media with you guys too. Like, how do I'm like, we don't do that. And so for a year and a half, it was like, we don't do that. And then eventually somebody was good enough to convince me to go outside of construction. And we got a lot of creatives that were, kind of coming into our culture that I met along the way. And it just made sense for us to, go deeper into the podcasting space,
Mhm.
start producing that high level content and cultural driven content that like shows the story of a company through social media, features the culture within the business. Like, who are all these people that work there? What's their stories, and how do they treat their customers, and what drives them, and what, all the things that people actually want to know before they do business with somebody, instead of like, taking pictures of your watches and stuff like that you see on social media.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, that's what we focused on. And so One Team Media was born out of, focusing on doing construction based marketing and media for people. And yeah, that's kind of where that came from.
And now it's outside of construction. It's just its own thing. It's just a media company, right?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
It's,
We've
wow.
got, I think, 8 people that are directly connected to that organization, and then, plenty of, outsourced partners that we work with to, deal with volume and things like that.
So, listening to one of the overwhelming themes I've heard is your willingness to get in and help. Like you willingness to help with the guy that you met as a customer of Verizon, willingness to get into a startup situation and grow that the best that you could. And then the idea that, hey, all the mistakes that I've made, all the wins that I've had, how do we dial in and teach other people, like teach them how to fish, and you said it, one of my best friends, that's his rule of life. A rising tide raises all the ships. There's just so few people that actually live that out. Right. Um, but it's this constant, how can I give back to where, like in the industry that I am in, and to your community? Cause I see you do a lot of community events too. Um, but I think when I look at how you've shown up, the way you describe yourself as a role model to 5 amazing children, husband, president, CEO, lover of life, and man of God. Like nowhere in the does it say I give her back, but all those situations, the role model of five amazing children, like you recognizing the fact that the lessons that you're going to teach your kids are the ones they catch, not the ones you teach. Um, how have you seen that? Because you do have five children. That's a pretty big tribe, by the way. That's a very big tribe of children. Where have you seen that start to play out in how they are starting to live? And I know your oldest is 13, am I right? 12?
12 should be
12,
13 in August. Yep.
right? Have you seen the result of that in your offspring? In other words, like things that they've seen you do, the way that you've walked your life out, the way you and Lori live your life. Have you seen them begin to live those lessons out themselves, even at that young of an age?
Yeah, it was crazy, man. It's crazy timing for you to ask me this question. So last weekend at the retreat, my daughter has sat in, I think, the last three or four. And so, she sits in the room and takes notes and observes. And you wonder, like, what are they catching? What are they picking up? And we, on Sunday of the retreat, we call it the circle. So everybody sits in a big circle. You take the microphone, you say your word for the weekend, like what did the weekend mean to you? And then you kind of describe why you chose that word. And I actually just got the video today sent to me. So fresh in my mind. I've watched it a couple times today. But her word was growth. And she said, every year the room gets bigger, there's new people, and she's enjoyed watching the growth of everyone. And she said, when this all started, I was only 7 years old. And so I just wondered why my dad was going on another business trip. Why did he have to leave again? And over time, I realized that he was building this amazing community of people and contractors that would take care of each other and answer every question that anybody would have. And it's been amazing to see the growth of everyone, and it's been amazing to be part of it. And dude, it was funny. I look around that circle, and I got the onion cutting disease,
Sure.
and so does everybody else in the circle that has children. Is like, man, this is incredible. Like, because she's just sitting there taking it all in, right? And you don't know, what they think, um, when they're little.
Right.
Frankly, you don't think, sometimes you don't think much about that. You might take a moment, but you never have the answer, right? And so for her to give that answer in the middle of that circle is like, I'm sure you feel the same, man. It's like, being a parent, you never know. You don't know what you're doing. Are you right? Are you not right? I hope so. Doing the best that I can. It's why it's on every profile that I have. Like my number one responsibility, man, is to be, uh, to first be a man of God, but these kids get one example, man.
Mm.
They get, a mother and father, and that's the only example they have. And, so whatever they learn, they're going to learn from me, like the good and the bad. And so, I'm just trying to make it more good than bad, right? Like at the end of the day, I know there's going to be some bad in there, but I'm trying to overwhelm the bad with some good. And, that was a moment of validation for me that felt pretty good.
That's good. That's a real good story. And one of the best conversations that somebody ever had with me was, and I've got three daughters, and they're like, what would it be like if they married a man like you? Like you're to give them the example of the husband they should be looking for. And it goes for your boys too. Like you're giving them the example of the husband and man they should be striving to be. And it's that role model in so many different ways. And but to see it play, to be able to hear it play out, man, I'd have been a mess. I'd
Oh
have
yeah.
been,
And listen, man, I would say, when you just said that out loud, I think I'd take it, man. I think I'd take it. If Paisley or Stella married somebody like me that, you know, looks out for their family and is a you know, good biblical example most of the time, you know.
yeah. When the guy,
Most of the time might be exaggerating some weeks, but and you know, and I love my wife, and I have a good life. It's not perfect, but I have a good life. I think I'd take it.
yeah,
And that's a pretty good feeling.
I can say when when the gentleman that asked me that question, I wouldn't have taken it. But for me, it was a wake up call,
Yeah.
and, usually when I introduce myself as a bold man who acts with integrity and from love, standing as a beacon pointing to God's grace and mercy, like that's my statement of who I'm trying to be every day. And I was blessed this year. That conversation was had with me 10 years ago. It'll be 11 years in July. And this past July, I'm going to do the investigation to see if it correlates with when I got asked the question. But I watched my oldest get engaged. And if I was going to describe who proposed to her, he would be bold, he'd be integrous, he would be from love, and he stands as a P. I mean, he is that, you
There
know,
you go.
and he's just
Mission
decided that
accomplished,
he
brother.
decided to be that at 23. So
Hey, I'd say, that's we may never reach the top of the stairs, but that's probably a landing, right?
yeah,
That's a
yeah,
landing spot where you get to take a look for a minute and say, like, all
yeah,
right, we'll take that, right?
yeah. It was we're sitting here walking through your whole life, but sometimes that, like, taking the moment and recognizing that sometimes it takes 20 years to get to a certain spot, right? But to be able to look back and go, hey, I can see 10 years worth of work come to an amazing fruition in something, whether that's
And by the way,
personally
brother,
or business or.
I'd have the same answer probably 11 or 12 years ago if I'm telling the truth. Like, when Paisley was born, I don't know that I'd, would have had the same answer. I'd have been okay with it, but I'm not, I wouldn't have been as confident.
But today,
Today, I'd take it. Yeah.
yeah, yeah, that's personal growth. Like that's stairs.
Oh, yeah. Oh, dude, listen, exhausting days on those stairs, brother. Like, climbing, busting your teeth on the stairs, getting back up, feeling like you don't know if there's another stair in front of you or if it's a big cliff, and just having faith, dude, faith in God, faith in yourself, faith in the people around you, blind faith to keep going, and the relentless refusal to quit.
That's good. One final thought. If somebody's listening to this today and they're in this same journey, like personal development journey, personal business journey, whatever journey they're on moving forward, what's the one takeaway you would want them to take away from this conversation?
Man, have faith that God has a plan for you, and don't ever let you take control of what God has in store. Don't let your earthly thoughts stop what God has in store for you. Because I look around here, brother, and there is no way, dude. I know what all my flaws are, right? Like there's just no way without God's grace that all of this is possible, and that grace comes through many different, those blessings come through many different messengers. My wife blessed me in that moment to give me the confidence to do it, but that's God putting that in her heart to share that, right? And that's the message, man. I think too many times we overthink earthly things. It's like, well, what if? Dude, you'll be fine. You know, no matter what happens, what ifs are always around the corner, but so are blessings, and you get to choose which one you're going to follow.
Yeah, that's good. That's good, Brian. Well, I just want to say thank you for your time today.
Pleasure,
And
brother.
what a blessing of the conversation this has been. And I know people will learn something from it. Thank you, buddy.
Thank you, brother. Appreciate you, man.